Rocky wasn't just a boxing movie. It proved anyone could rise from nothing. The characters felt real, filled with hope. But years later, the actors behind them lived far darker realities. From broken marriages to sudden deaths, their lives turned more tragic than the film itself. Let's revisit their names and the legacies they left behind. Talia Shire as Adrian Penino. Talia Shire was born on April 25, 1946 in New York City, United States. At 30 years old, she played Adrian Penino, the quiet, emotional anchor of Rocky, 1976. Her performance gave the film its stillness, allowing vulnerability to balance violence and turning Rocky's struggle into something deeply human. That restraint was shaped early in her life. Growing up in the Coppola family placed Shire under constant comparison, especially as her brother Francis Ford Coppola rose rapidly within the industry. Access did not equal acceptance. She faced doubts about her appearance and emotional range, forcing her to prove herself through persistence rather than privilege. Gradual progress through early roles led to The Godfather and later Rocky, where her controlled performance became her defining strength. As professional recognition stabilized, her private life grew more fragile. Shire's first marriage to composer David Shire unraveled under emotional distance and conflicting priorities. A sense of balance returned with producer Jack Schwartzman, but it was abruptly destroyed in 1994 when he died from pancreatic cancer. Widowed with 2 sons, Shire stepped away from visibility, choosing grief and responsibility over momentum. That loss reshaped her relationship with acting itself. Rather than withdrawing completely, she returned selectively, appearing in films such as Kiss the Bride and I Heart Huckabees, roles that reflected maturity rather than ambition. Her career no longer chased validation, instead settling into measured, intentional choices shaped by experience. Now, Shire is 80 years old, living largely outside the spotlight. Her estimated net worth of $40 million comes from a disciplined acting career and the Coppola family legacy. Though her presence on screen became quieter with time, her impact remains intact. Sylvester Stallone as Rocky Balboa. Sylvester Stallone was born on July 6, 1946, in New York City, United States. At 30 years old, he played Rocky Balboa, the struggling unknown boxer in Rocky, 1976. That performance did more than lead the film. It carried its emotional truth, turning a simple boxing story into a reflection of real human survival. That realism did not come from imagination, but from Stallone's early life. Poverty and his parents' divorce forced him into unstable environments where confidence had to be built without support. As he drifted into adulthood, those experiences followed him into early acting attempts, visible in raw performances like The Lords of Flatbush, where frustration and endurance were already present on screen. As his career slowly gained momentum, that same intensity spilled into his personal life. Stallone's first marriage to Sasha Chak fractured under financial stress and relentless ambition, ending in divorce. Years later, the pain resurfaced in its most devastating form when their son Sage Stallone died of heart disease in 2012 at age 36. Seeking distraction rather than healing, Stallone entered a short, volatile marriage with Brigitte Nielsen, marked by media spectacle and emotional instability. His later marriage to Jennifer Flavin, begun in 1997, offered structure, yet even that relationship nearly collapsed in 2022 under the weight of long-accumulated strain. While his relationships absorbed emotional damage, his body absorbed physical punishment. Determined to appear invincible on screen, Stallone insisted on real contact during fight scenes across Rocky and Rambo. A blow during Rocky IV sent him to intensive care, and repeated injuries led to spinal damage, internal trauma, and heart complications. Surgeries became routine, and chronic pain turned into a permanent condition rather than a temporary consequence. Today, Stallone is 80 years old, still active as an actor, producer, and television lead. His estimated net worth of $400 million reflects decades of box office dominance, production ventures, and real estate investments, earned only after surviving homelessness, personal loss, and physical collapse. His life now mirrors Rocky's final rounds, slower, scarred, but still refusing to fall. Bert Young as Paulie Panino. Bert Young was born on April 30, 1940, in Queens, New York, United States. At 36 years old, he played Paulie Panino, Rocky Balboa's volatile brother-in-law in Rocky, 1976. His performance injected the film with raw bitterness and working-class anger, giving Rocky's world emotional friction and painful realism. That harshness was rooted in Young's early life. Raised in a blue-collar Italian-American family in Queens, he grew up surrounded by poverty, street violence, and emotional restraint. Seeking escape, he joined the U.S. Marine Corps as a teenager, where boxing became both discipline and survival. Those experiences shaped his screen presence in early films like The Gambler and The Killer Elite, where his toughness felt lived in rather than performed. Professional recognition did not translate into personal stability. Young married his wife Gloria, but their time together was brief and marked by illness. In 1974, Gloria died after a long battle with disease, leaving Young alone with their daughter. He never remarried, choosing a solitary life that mirrored the emotional isolation he often portrayed on screen. As his career continued, his health slowly declined. Though he remained active in film, television, painting, and writing, years of physical strain and age-related complications took their toll. Cardiovascular issues worsened over time, gradually limiting his energy and public appearances while he continued to work quietly. Finally, Bert Young died on October 8, 2023, at the age of 83, at Northridge Hospital Medical Center in Los Angeles. The cause of death was cardiac arrest, with contributing conditions including myocardial infarction, atrial fibrillation, and atherosclerosis. He was buried at Mount St. Mary Cemetery in Flushing, Queens. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was $2 million, earned through decades of acting, painting, and writing. Burgess Meredith as Mickey Goldmill. Burgess Meredith was born on November 16, 1907, in Cleveland, Ohio, United States. At 69 years old, he played Mickey Goldmill, the hard-edged trainer who becomes Rocky Balboa's brutal moral compass in Rocky, 1976. Mickey's grit forced Rocky to confront discipline, fear, and pride like a man with nothing left to waste. That sharp, no-nonsense intensity traced back to a life that learned early how quickly doors can close. Meredith grew up with money pressures and the kind of emotional strain, then carried that hunger into work that demanded toughness and precision. Roles like George Milton in Of Mice and Men, 1939, and Ernie Pyle in The Story of G.I. Joe, 1945, proved he could make quiet pain feel physical. Then the political climate of the McCarthy era hit, and being tied to suspicion was enough to cost him opportunities. The blacklist years didn't just slow his momentum, they forced him to survive long stretches by leaning on stage, radio, and sheer persistence until film finally opened up again. That same volatility showed up in his private life, where love rarely stayed simple. Meredith married 4 times, and the pattern was never just romance, it was upheaval, reinvention, and loss. His marriage to Paulette Goddard, 1944 to 1949, ended in divorce, and the grief was made worse by the trauma of losing a child in infancy through pregnancy complications. Earlier, his first marriage to Helen Derby Berrien ended, and years later she died by suicide, another shadow that lingered in the background of his life. Eventually, Meredith found longevity with Kaya Sunstein, a marriage that lasted decades and brought 2 children. As the years passed, the strain wasn't only emotional, it became physical and neurological. Meredith later acknowledged severe mood swings connected to cyclothymia, and in his final chapter, his health deteriorated under the weight of Alzheimer's disease, while melanoma added another relentless pressure to a body already worn down by time. Even as illness advanced, his name remained recognizable through late career visibility, but behind the scenes the decline was real, progressive, and unforgiving. Finally, he died on September 9, 1997, at the age of 89, at his home in Malibu, California, from complications of Alzheimer's disease and melanoma, after years of worsening health. His estimated net worth at death was $5 million, a modest number compared to the size of his legacy, earned through decades of film, theater, television, and the stubborn refusal to disappear when the industry tried to push him out. Carl Weathers as Apollo Creed. Carl Weathers was born on January 14, 1948, in New Orleans, Louisiana, United States. At 28 years old, he played Apollo Creed, the charismatic heavyweight champion in Rocky, 1976. His performance gave the film its mythic scale, transforming a simple boxing match into a clash between spectacle and hunger. That commanding presence emerged from a difficult upbringing. Growing up in a poor neighborhood of New Orleans, Weathers learned early that survival required discipline. He turned to sports as an escape, excelling in football before injuries ended his athletic career. The transition into acting was uncertain, but early roles in films like Friday Foster and Bucktown revealed a natural authority that carried over into Rocky and later into Predator. Success on screen did not bring stability at home. Weathers married Mary Ann Castle in 1973, but the marriage ended in divorce a decade later. 2 more marriages followed, first to Rona Unsell, then to Jennifer Peterson, both ending in separation. Despite later companionship, long-term emotional permanence eluded him, and he spent much of his later life alone. Physically, the demands of action roles accumulated. Years of intense training, combined with long-standing cardiovascular issues, gradually weakened his health. Though he remained active in film and television, including later appearances and production work, atherosclerotic heart disease progressed quietly in the background. Sadly, he died at his home in Los Angeles on February 1, 2024, at the age of 76, from atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. His body was cremated, and later that year he was posthumously honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was $8 million, built through acting, producing, and decades of enduring screen presence, leaving behind a legacy defined by strength, pride, and unfulfilled longing. Thayer David as George Miles Juergens. Thayer David was born on March 4, 1927, in Medford, Massachusetts, United States. At 49 years old, he played George Miles Juergens, the fight promoter who brings pressure, money, and manipulation into the ring in Rocky, 1976. His presence helped thicken the film's atmosphere. That edge wasn't accidental. It came from a life built around pushing forward even when stability felt uncertain. David grew up in a family environment that, by your material, felt shaky enough to force early self-reliance, and he moved toward the stage as if it were the one place he could control his identity. He didn't take the easy road through fame. He built craft first, even co-founding the Brattle Theater Company, and then began taking roles that required intelligence and menace rather than charm. That intensity carried into his relationships, where the same complexity often meant pain. David married actress Valerie French in 1970, but the marriage ended in divorce in 1975, leaving behind a private fracture that never became tabloid spectacle, yet still shaped his life. There were no children, and the separation seemed to deepen the sense that his world was built around work, not comfort. Even so, the connection between them didn't fully die. Your material notes they had been planning to remarry. Work kept accelerating, but the pace was punishing. David's schedule stretched across film, television, and voiceover work, and the more visible he became, the more the strain seemed to sit on his body. He continued taking striking parts, like the albino spymaster Dragon in the Eiger Sanction, 1975, and major roles in television movies and series work. Sadly, Thayer David died on July 17, 1978, in New York City, at the age of 51, from a heart attack, ending his career at the exact moment it appeared to be expanding into bigger, more permanent opportunities. His estimated net worth at death was $1 million, earned through decades of hard character work that rarely receives the financial reward of stardom. Jimmy Gambina, as Mike Jimmy Gambina, was born on May 3, 1943, in Hollywood, California, United States. At 33 years old, he played Mike, a working-class boxer who grounds Rocky, 1976, in gym floor realism rather than fantasy. His brief presence reinforced the film's authenticity, showing the thin line between hope and routine survival. That realism came from lived experience. Growing up in a labor-class environment, Gambina turned to boxing early as a way out, learning discipline through bruises and repetition. The ring shaped his posture and timing, qualities that translated naturally when he stepped into film. Appearances around the era, such as Saturday Night Fever, show how his physical credibility carried across projects even when dialogue was minimal. Career momentum, however, stayed modest. Gambina transitioned from boxing to acting without the machinery of stardom behind him, landing mostly supporting or background roles. The work was steady rather than spectacular, built on reliability instead of headlines, and it reflected a man comfortable contributing to a story without needing to dominate it. Today, Jimmy Gambina is 83 years old. He lives largely outside the spotlight, remembered most for his authentic presence in Rocky and later appearances like Snake Eyes. His estimated net worth of $1 million reflects a career built on craft and longevity rather than fame, proof that not every lasting contribution needs a leading role to matter. Joe Spinel as Tony Gazzo. Joe Spinel was born on October 28, 1936, in Manhattan, New York, United States. At 40 years old, he played Tony Gazzo, the ruthless loan shark who turns Rocky's dream into a debt-driven gamble in Rocky, 1976. Gazzo anchored the story in street-level danger, reminding viewers what failure would actually cost. That menace was shaped early. Raised in an Italian immigrant household marked by poverty and instability, Spinel learned to work young and survive fast, carrying the weight of responsibility after his father's early death. He battled chronic asthma and lived with hemophilia from birth, conditions that made physical vulnerability a constant companion. Those pressures hardened his presence and fed into early screen work, like The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2. As the work intensified, so did the personal strain. Spinel married adult film actress Jean Jennings in 1977. They had one daughter before divorcing in 1979. The separation, coupled with the loss of his mother in 1987, fractured his emotional anchor. Friendships thinned, including a painful rift with Sylvester Stallone after Nighthawks, and isolation began to mirror the lonely figures he played. Health became the turning point. Alongside hemophilia and asthma, Spinel struggled with intermittent substance abuse and depression, which worsened as grief accumulated. A serious fall in his apartment caused deep cuts. Because of his hemophilia, bleeding became catastrophic. Finally, Joe Spinel died on January 13, 1989, at the age of 52, in his Queens apartment. The immediate circumstances involved severe bleeding after a fall, with his lifelong hemophilia compounding the trauma. Reports also cited cardiac stress in his final collapse. He was buried at Calvary Cemetery, Queens. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was $2 million, earned through decades of character work, from Rocky to Maniac, that left a permanent mark despite a life cut short. Jodi Letizia as Marie. Jodi Letizia was born on October 8, 1963, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, United States. At 13 years old, she played Marie, the sharp-tongued neighborhood girl Rocky tries to steer away from trouble, in Rocky, 1976. Though young, her role grounded the film in real streets and real consequences, giving voice to the cycle Rocky hoped to break. Her early life was comparatively stable, allowing her to step into acting at a young age with confidence rather than desperation. Growing up in Philadelphia, she transitioned naturally from child performer to stage presence, learning timing and delivery early on. That foundation later supported her shift toward live performance, where storytelling demanded stamina and command, not just a single memorable scene. Unlike many child actors, Letizia's career didn't chase constant visibility. She appeared sparingly on screen after Rocky, reprising Marie as an adult in Rocky V, 1990, but chose not to pursue a traditional Hollywood path. Instead, she leaned into theater and musical comedy, building a quieter but more controlled professional life. Health crises and public scandals never defined her trajectory. The challenge she faced was longevity. How to reshape an identity formed by one iconic childhood role. She answered that by carving out space on stage, developing one-woman shows and ensemble performances that emphasized voice, humor, and character over fame. Now, Jodi Letizia is 63 years old. She continues to work primarily in live performance, touring with stage shows, and embracing a creative life outside mainstream film. Her estimated net worth of $500,000 reflects a career built on independence and adaptability, proving that survival in entertainment doesn't always mean staying visible. It can also mean staying true. George Memmoli as ice rink attendant. George Memmoli was born on August 3, 1938 in Queens, New York City, United States. At 38 years old, he played the ice rink attendant, the quiet gatekeeper who allows Rocky and Adrian their first fragile moment of intimacy. In Rocky, 1976. That brief scene softened the film's grit, offering a pause of tenderness that made the love story believable. That sensitivity came from a rough, urban upbringing. Growing up in New York's unforgiving neighborhoods, Memmoli learned early how to read people and survive pressure, instincts that later fueled his performances. He gravitated toward raw, street-level storytelling, becoming a close collaborator of Martin Scorsese in films like Mean Streets, 1973, and New York, New York. Those roles marked him as an actor who didn't polish reality. He exposed it. As his career expanded, instability followed. On the set of Blue Collar, a violent on-set incident left Memmoli with a fractured skull, forcing him into legal action and interrupting his momentum. Earlier stunt injuries had already cost him opportunities, including a role he had to turn down during recovery. The work kept coming, but always with physical consequences that shadowed his progress. Those injuries never truly healed. Years of accumulated trauma weakened his health, and according to Scorsese, the damage sustained during production ultimately contributed to his decline. What began as isolated accidents slowly became a chain reaction, narrowing his future and exhausting his resilience. Finally, he died on May 20th, 1985, in Los Angeles, California, at the age of 46. His death was attributed to complications stemming from earlier on-set injuries. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was $500,000, earned through a career that burned brightly, but far too briefly, leaving behind performances remembered for their honesty rather than their length. Stan Shaw as Dipper. Stan Shaw was born on July 14, 1952, in Chicago, Illinois, United States. At 24 years old, he played Dipper, a small but memorable street-level character who adds texture to Rocky Balboa's neighborhood world in Rocky, 1976. Though brief, the role helped flesh out the film's social environment, reinforcing that Rocky's journey was shaped by the people around him, not just the ring. That grounded presence was rooted in Shaw's upbringing. Raised in a working-class family in Chicago, He grew up with limited resources and learned early the value of discipline and persistence. Those pressures pushed him toward performance as both expression and escape. As his career developed, that background translated into authentic supporting work in projects like Harlem Nights and The Monster Squad, where he consistently embodied characters who felt lived in rather than performed. That steadiness extended into his personal life. Shaw married Zoe Shaw, and together they built a family with 4 children, anchoring him in stability away from sets and auditions. The balance between work and home gave his stable career. Today, Stan Shaw is 74 years old. He remains active in the entertainment industry, working selectively as an actor, writer, and producer while mentoring younger creatives. His estimated net worth of $4 million reflects a career sustained by consistency rather than spectacle, a quiet contrast to the volatility often associated with Hollywood success. Looking back at the cast of Rocky, 1976, it's impossible not to feel the weight of time. Some found lasting success, others faded quietly, and many carried private struggles that never made it into the ring. Which cast member's story affected you the most? And did any of these tragic paths surprise you in 2026? If this journey through the lives behind Rocky moved you, leave a comment, share the video, and subscribe for more deep, untold stories about classic films and the people who lived them.